Becoming a Writer. Dear Mr. Silverberg, I am 16 years old, or 18, or 57, and I want to write more than anything in the world. Please tell me how to go about it. Thank you. Sometimes, but not always, the letter goes on to say, I enclose a stamped, self-addressed envelope. I get such letters all the time. Every reasonably well-known professional writer does. Usually I don't answer them, even the ones that do enclose stamped, self-addressed envelopes, because if I did, I'd have no time left over to do anything else. I sometimes think that everybody on this planet wants to write, except some of those who already are writers and wish they were almost anything else. Compare Robert Silverberg's retirement address, 1975. I will never write for publication again, or words to that effect. There's another reason why I rarely reply to such letters, aside from the fact that my time is finite. The sense of futility that smites me when I hear someone say, I want to write. Silverberg's first law of writing holds that people who merely want to write aren't ever going to. Either you are a writer or you aren't, and if you are, you're doing it. Do you think the young Harlan Ellison went around telling people he wanted to write? Isaac Asimov, Norman Spinrad, Ray Bradbury, Ursula Le Guin, Frederick Pohl? Nah, all those people, once they realized that the manipulation of words was the task for which they had been designed, immediately sat down and started writing. I began turning out stories when I was 7, and I'd be astonished if any of the others I've just named got a much later start. There may be some well-known writers who didn't begin writing for his own pleasure almost as soon as he learned how to read. Robert A. Heinlein, maybe, since he had a career in the Navy before he became a writer, but there can't be many. The corollary of Silverberg's first law holds that anyone whom the gods designed to be a writer starts producing fiction long before anyone else in the world thinks he has the slightest bit of aptitude for the job, usually in early childhood. That takes care of the people who want to write, but somehow never do any writing because they're waiting around to learn the magic secret. But then there are those who say they want to be writers. That's different. They're already writing. Now they want to know how to make a career out of it. When I encounter these people, and usually it's in person, not by letter, I generally offer them Silverberg's 3 rules for literary success. Read a lot, write a lot, read a lot more, write a lot more. That's all there is to it, folks. The true writer immerses himself in the printed words hours a day. He can't possibly satiate his appetite for words. He gobbles stories in carload lots. But he doesn't just read them, he dissects them, analyzes the number of incidents per 1,000 words, measures the ratio of dialogue to exposition, studies the manner of opening a story and the way of closing it. He looks at the way characters are named and the way objects are described. In the process, he tends to surrender some of the innocent joy of reading for its own sake. But that's part of the price of admission to the trade. Of course, the would-be writer doesn't just read fiction. He reads everything. He reads the newspapers, he reads Scientific American, he reads Playboy, he reads accounts of voyages to Antarctica and the Himalayas and Jersey City, He reads biographies, he reads treatises on snail farming and city planning and medieval dentistry. There's no telling what sort of information will come in handy. Alexandre Dumas, the elder, one of the most productive writers who ever lived, used the metaphor of the writer as pitcher. You fill and fill and fill yourself with everything you can until the pitcher is full, and then you begin to pour. I know no writers who are not also insatiable and omnivorous readers. And having read, the beginner writes unceasingly. Ray Bradbury, when he was starting out, wrote a story a day. I scribbled awful little novels in my school copybooks when I should have been listening to the teacher. Ellison, you betcha, was doing the same thing, and so were all the rest of us. At first, the fledgling writer imitates whatever has pleased him most, which is why so many 10-year-olds write their own sequels to Huckleberry Finn, or The Wizard of Oz, or Star Wars, or whatever. That's all right. That's a completely legitimate way to begin. Even merely typing out someone else's published story yourself can help, as long as you don't try submitting it to a magazine. Manuscripts have very different textures from printed stories, and it's useful to learn the difference at an early age. Later on will come a different phase of the imitative period, when the beginner simply borrows the style of a favorite writer and uses it in a story of his own invention. Picking up the voice of Jack Vance, let's say, or Paul Anderson, or J.G. Ballard. And then, after that, at some magical point, the voice you use becomes your own voice, and then you are a writer. That's all there is to it. Read a lot, to fill yourself with a torrent of knowledge, and to make yourself aware of the techniques by which other writers have achieved their effects. And write a lot, so that by daily practice of the craft you achieve the ability to gain and hold the attention of readers, and then do more of both until writing becomes second nature. If the talent is there, and probably it is, if you have committed yourself to the disciplines of the art, then nothing more than immense hard work is required to turn yourself into a professional writer. Is that all, you say? No other advice except read and write? Well, there are a few trivial things to know, too, like typing your manuscripts on one side of the page, double-spaced, using a dark ribbon. Editors tend to think that a story that looks drab and gray probably is drab and gray, and there isn't much market for drab gray stories unless you're a genius of the order of Samuel Beckett. And even he hasn't won any Hugos. Stay away from dot matrix printers, too, and enclose return postage, and don't include a letter with your manuscript that tells the editor how good it is, or what it really means, or how much your uncle, who's a professor of literature at Texas A&M, thinks of it. But everybody, even beginners, knows that list of do's and don'ts, I suspect. The key to success lies in just two things. Read until your eyes go blurry. Write until your fingers ache. Every day, without fail, until you think you know what you're doing. And even when you do think you know what you're doing, don't stop learning how to do it better. Ever. The moment a writer stops growing, he starts to shrink. One more thing you ought to know, though, before you set out to become a writer. Silverberg's second law. Once a writer, always a writer. There's no escape. It's a life sentence, folks. Writers don't retire. They may take vacations, but they don't quit. You could ask Robert A. Heinlein. He's 79, I think, and just starting a new book. You could ask Jack Williamson. He's just finished one, and he's 78. Why, you could even ask me. I retired from writing forever in 1974 with my 40th birthday in sight. I told everyone who'd listen that I was never going to commit an act of literature again, so help me. And I've only had 6 novels published since then. Amazing Stories, May 1986.